Three men stand at the center of the world, each convinced the future belongs to him. They shake hands, swear loyalty, and divide power like gamblers splitting a deck of cards. But history has a cruel sense of humor, because every time Rome was ruled by three, it ended the same way: betrayal, bloodshed, and one man left standing over the bodies of the other two. This is the story of the Triumvirate, an arrangement meant to save the Roman Republic, but which instead tore it apart. It begins not with a law or a vote, but with desperation. By the 1st century BCE, Rome was rotting from the inside. It still called itself a republic, but power no longer flowed through ideals or institutions. It flowed through money, armies, and personal loyalty. The Senate talked, generals acted, and ambitious men learned that rules mattered less than results. One of those men was Gaius Julius Caesar. He was charismatic, deeply in debt, and dangerously popular with the masses. Another was Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general, a man who had conquered half the known world, but felt constantly underappreciated by the Senate. The third was Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, whose fortune was so vast it could buy almost anything, except respect. Individually, they were powerful. Together, they were unstoppable. There was no official announcement, no marble tablets, no public ceremony. The First Triumvirate was a secret understanding, a private deal struck behind closed doors. Gaius Julius Caesar would provide political skill and popularity. Pompey the Great would provide military glory. Marcus Licinius Crassus would provide money, oceans of it. In return, they would block each other's enemies, rig elections, and bend the Republic to their will. And it worked. Gaius Julius Caesar became consul. Pompey the Great got land for his veterans. Marcus Licinius Crassus secured lucrative financial reforms. Laws passed not because they were debated, but because they were enforced by intimidation and mobs. The Senate, once the heart of Roman governance, became a stage prop. But alliances built on ambition are fragile things. Marcus Licinius Crassus, desperate to rival Pompey the Great's military fame, made a fatal decision. He marched east to wage war against the Parthian Empire, chasing glory that had nothing to do with Rome's interests and everything to do with his ego. What followed was one of the most humiliating defeats in Roman history. At the Battle of Carrhae, Marcus Licinius Crassus was killed, his army annihilated. Legend says the Parthians poured molten gold down his throat, an insult carved into history. With Crassus gone, the triangle collapsed. Pompey and Caesar were no longer partners. They were rivals. The Senate, sensing opportunity, chose sides. They backed Pompey, naming him sole consul and ordering Caesar to give up his army. Caesar faced a choice: surrender and fade into obscurity, or defy the Republic itself. In the winter of 49 BCE, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his legion. It was a quiet act, almost mundane, but it shattered the Roman world. The die is cast, he supposedly said, and Rome plunged into civil war. Caesar's response was swift and shocking. With a single legion, Caesar dared to declare war on Rome itself. Pompey, despite commanding more troops on paper, was caught off guard. He abandoned Italy entirely, retreating to Greece to gather his forces. Rome, the heart of the Republic, fell into Caesar's hands without a fight. It was a stunning reversal, the conqueror of Gaul marching through Rome as Pompey fled east. What followed was not a single battle, but a deadly game of cat and mouse across the Mediterranean. Caesar moved fast, always fast. He crushed Pompey's allies in Spain with lightning campaigns, once joking that he went to fight an army without a general, while Pompey was a general without an army. But the joke wouldn't last forever. In 48 BCE, within only a year since Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon. The two men finally faced each other in Greece near a small town called Pharsalus. Pompey had the advantage. Nearly twice as many troops, superior cavalry, and the confidence of the Senate behind him. Caesar's soldiers were veterans hardened by years of brutal warfare, but they were outnumbered and exhausted. Pompey chose a cautious strategy, hoping Caesar would break himself against Pompey's defensive lines. Caesar, sensing the danger, made a daring move. He ordered a hidden fourth line of infantry to counter Pompey's powerful cavalry. When the cavalry charged, expecting an easy victory, Caesar's men attacked with ruthless precision, aiming not for bodies but for faces. Pompey's elite horsemen panicked and fled. The battlefield collapsed into chaos. Caesar's troops surged forward, Pompey's lines crumbled, and by day's end, the outcome was undeniable. Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general, was defeated. But the war was not over. Pompey fled to Egypt, hoping for refuge. Instead, he was betrayed. As he stepped ashore, he was stabbed to death by men seeking Caesar's favor. They severed his head and presented it as a gift. Caesar's reaction was not triumph, but horror. He wept. Pompey had been his ally, his rival, and the last real obstacle between him and absolute power. The civil war would drag on against Pompey's supporters, but its soul had died on that Egyptian beach. The battles between Caesar and Pompey were not just clashes of armies. They were collisions of ambition, loyalty, and fear. They marked the moment when the Roman Republic crossed its own Rubicon, never to return. With Caesar victorious and Pompey murdered in Egypt, Caesar became dictator for life. The Republic was effectively dead. But then, on the Ides of March, Caesar would also meet his own fate. He was stabbed 23 times by men who believed they were saving Rome. They were wrong, because chaos does not create freedom. It creates a vacuum. And into that vacuum stepped another three men. The Second Triumvirate was nothing like the first. This one was official, legal, and terrifying. It consisted of Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, cold, patient, and only 19 years old. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general, bold, emotional, and dangerously impulsive. And Marcus Lepidus, a competent but forgettable politician who would soon learn what it meant to be the weakest link. Unlike the First Triumvirate, this one announced itself with blood. They published lists of enemies called proscriptions. If your name was on it, you were marked for death. Your property would be seized, your family ruined. Friends could betray you for a reward. Thousands died. Among them was Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, whose severed head and hands were displayed in the Forum as a warning. Rome had never seen terror like this, legalized murder in the name of stability. For a time, the Second Triumvirate held. They defeated Caesar's assassins at Philippi. They divided the Roman world. Octavian took the west, Antony the east, Lepidus Africa. On paper, it looked balanced. In reality, it was already cracking. Lepidus was pushed aside with ease, stripped of power and reduced to irrelevance. No dramatic battle, no heroic last stand, just political suffocation. Rome forgot him almost overnight. That left two. Octavian and Antony could not have been more different. Octavian was disciplined, calculating, a master of image and propaganda. Antony was a warrior, generous, reckless, and deeply human. And then there was Cleopatra. Antony fell in love with the Queen of Egypt, and Rome watched with suspicion as he adopted Eastern customs, dressed like a monarch, and promised territories to Cleopatra's children. Octavian seized the narrative. He painted Antony as a traitor, bewitched by a foreign queen. ready to hand Rome to Egypt. The truth was more complicated, but truth rarely wins wars. In 31 BCE, the fleets met at Actium. The battle was chaotic, brutal, and decisive. Antony and Cleopatra fled. Their forces collapsed. A year later, both were dead. Antony by his own hand, Cleopatra by poison, legend, or serpent. Octavian stood alone. He did something brilliant. He refused the title of king. He claimed he was restoring the Republic. He called himself Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The triumvirate had ended just as it always does. 3 men enter, 1 survives. The pattern is impossible to ignore. Triumvirates promise balance, cooperation, shared power. In reality, they magnify ambition, sharpen rivalries, and delay the inevitable struggle for dominance. Power does not like to be divided, not for long. Rome learned this lesson twice at catastrophic cost. The republic that feared kings ended up creating emperors, and the alliances meant to save it only hastened its fall. The triumvirate is remembered as a compromise, but history tells a darker story. When 3 men rule, someone is always counting the days until only 1 remains.